Yom Tov, and welcome to our fourth session of Minutes of Midrash. And I'm Rabbi Dennis, and probably we're getting close to the end of my vacation if you're seeing this. So I'll be back soon, and I hope conditions have improved. It's very unfortunate what we're having to deal with, and that I have to do these talk at you Torah study, because as I've said, interactive Torah is the best Torah. But I'm going to continue here. This session is brought to you by the Statue of Liberty. Now, statues, they've not got a terribly good reputation this year. We're spending a lot of time addressing the inappropriateness of certain statues around America, right? Those of you who know me, and especially know my Facebook page, you know I have absolutely no tolerance for endorsement of the Confederacy. I loathe the fact that 150 years later we still valorize and celebrate traitors and people who not only owned slaves, which was part and parcel of the culture at that time, but went to war and killed fellow Americans to keep their slaves. I have no sympathy for these people, and I have no interest in it. So it doesn't trouble me that statues get torn down in this regard. This feels very biblical to me. It's, pull down the idols. These are idols. On the other hand, not all statues are bad, all right? And the fact of the matter is we have many important and wonderful statues, chief example being the Statue of Liberty, which embodies so many important values of the United States and represents something that I think most Americans identify with. I'm sorry to hear that General Grant has been afflicted lately and attacked. Once you get on that path, you got to tear down everything. Discernment seems to disappear. So hopefully that's calming down and we're not yanking down everybody. I also know that Robert Gould Shaw, the commander of the 1st Black Regiment in Boston, his monument in Boston got defaced. And not only is that a monument to a man who was willing to die for the freedom of Black people. He was an abolitionist from childhood and took on the command of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment specifically because he believed in the liberty of African Americans. But he was also, it's also a great work of art. The Boston statue is not just any old statue thrown up, produced by any old person. It's actually the work of a great sculptor whose name just immediately went out of my head. But it's a work of art in itself. And if you've ever seen it in Boston, you know how beautiful and magnificent and moving that monument is. So not all statues are bad. So trying to figure out what is good and what is bad in the world is what we're going to talk about today. The twofold nature of existence, of all things. All things have two aspects to them. Multiplicity. God may be one, but the world is not. And so what we're going to do is a midrash, relatively continues to be a simple tradition. We're going back to Midrash Tanhuma that I talked to originally. It's not going to be as shocking or daring as the one we did last week. It's going to be more accessible, but it is going to talk about something that is still somewhat controversial in the modern world. Something that the rabbis believe strongly in, but we may have our doubts, but maybe we can think of ways we can do some modern midrash to reimagine it. So we're going back to Midrash Tanhuma, which I told you about at the very first session. That's the Midrash Collection. Here it is. that is devoted to the 5 books of Moses. It covers all 5 books, not in a comprehensive way, but rather focusing on certain verses. And a good part of the book of Genesis is devoted simply to the first verse, Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And we're going to look at section 5, which continues to focus on that one verse. And not only that one verse, as we learned, it's going to focus on the first word of that one verse, and not just the word. It's actually really, really interested in the first letter of Breshit. So let's see what they do with that. Here we go, Tanhuma. I'm going to go to share. All right. So here we are, 5th chapter. Tanhuma has been talking about this one verse for 5 chapters. It just can't get enough of the first verse of Genesis. And here it is. In the beginning, God created, Breshit bara Elohim. And again, we're just going to be talking about Breshit. It is written elsewhere. And that is elsewhere, meaning that there are earlier Midrashim who make this point. So at this point, they're just reiterating in a slightly different way the same message. In reference to this verse, blessings upon the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked concealeth violence. The world is twofold. And in fact, virtually all the verses of Proverbs does this compare and contrast structure. It will say the way of righteousness of the righteous is smooth, but the way of the wicked is drop off with spikes at the bottom. It's always doing this this invidious comparison thing, right? So blessings are upon the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked concealeth violence. Okay, so reality is twofold. Okay, and then it goes on to take us back to our original verse. Why did the Holy One, blessed be He, commence the account of the creation of His world with the letter Bet rather than the letter Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet? Is that even a question? Why would you ask such a question? It makes no sense. It begins with a bet because you can't say Breshit without Bet. But again, return to how the Midrashic rabbis think. They're thinking about the idea that nothing is incidental in the Torah, that it's all music. There is no noise. Therefore, the fact that that God somehow chose to start the entire Torah with the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet rather than the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is significant. And all we have to do is investigate far enough, and we will find what that significance is. And now they're going to go on. He did so because the Aleph is the first letter of the word arur. Arur is the Hebrew word to be cursed. And it appears in the 3rd chapter of Genesis for the first time when God says that the earth is cursed because of the transgression of the earthling and the living thing, Adam and Eve. So we know that curses are just around the corner if we're not careful. While the Bet is the first letter of the word Baruch, blessed. And of course, we know that one. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, right? So God deliberately does this to start the world off on the best possible foot, right? Instead of starting off with a word that is even remotely associated with the word curse, God starts off the world with a letter that is the beginning of the word blessing. All right. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, I will begin the account of the creation of the world with the letter that symbolizes a blessing. Nice. It actually is an extension of the biblical narrative, because what does the biblical narrative tell us? The biblical narrative tells us that each and every day that God created the world, He made it good. He finishes, He saw it, and it was good. And then on the at the end, when he creates human beings, he goes on, he says, Tov Ma'od, it's very good. All right, so the idea that the world is better than average, the world bends towards good, is the message of the Torah. And so the Midrash reinforces that with the simple statement, not only is the world bending towards good, the world is bending towards blessing, which is of a different scale, of a different order than good. All right, so God wants us to look at the world as a blessing, to experience the world as a blessing. But then it goes on to make an observation that we all know to be true, that sometimes it doesn't seem like a blessing. All right, even though the account of the creation of the world starts with a letter that symbolizes a blessing, mankind angered its creator, and it's referring to chapter 3 of Genesis, where the curse comes. So it didn't help. We started out with a blessing, we ended with a curse. So what good was that? And then the answer is, how much angrier would man have made him if the creation narrative had commenced with the letter symbolizing a curse? In other words, it could be worse. All right, it didn't work out perfectly. Sometimes blessings are not the most evident thing we find in the world. Sometimes we feel cursed. Sometimes we experience burdens. Sometimes the world doesn't seem so good. But the goal is that we experience it as good and blessing. If God had not emphasized these two aspects to creation, it could be so much worse, which is such an incredibly Jewish answer to any problem. It could be worse, you know? There's got to be a silver lining in this cloud, even though Jews often think that there's a cloud in every silver lining. All right. So it's just the idea that the world is a good place, even if you're not feeling it right now. And if you dig deep enough, as the Midrashis does, you may discover that. But then we have, as always there is, another explanation, and this takes us into another issue. Another explanation as to why the account of creation begins with a bet is that the letter bet is employed to teach man that there are two worlds. Now, here again, the Midrashis assumes you know something that you might not, and that is that the Hebrew alphabet also serves as the numbering system in early Hebrew. We now use Indian letters, which we now refer to as Arabic letters, but they're really invented in the subcontinent. But in any case, that's not so important. What's really important is zero. The zero makes everything work. But that's not what we're talking about. In ancient Hebrew and medieval Hebrew, and to this day, the Aleph Bet also serves as a numbering system. So Aleph is number 1, Bet is number 2, Gimel is number 3, and so and so. All right. So the Bet not only conveys the idea of blessing, but it suggests that the world is twofold, which I implied at the beginning of my presentation. That there's two aspects to everything. There's blessing and curse, but in this particular case, the letter Bet is employed in order to teach man there are two worlds, two universes, this world and the hereafter. Now, in earlier sessions, I alluded to what is the reward of the righteous, and I said that Judaism is not a salvific religion. We don't talk about the idea that if you adhere to certain doctrines or you believe certain things or you meet certain criteria, you will be saved, and otherwise you're doomed, whether it be you as a person or your soul or whatever you imagine it to be. That's not really an aspect of the Jewish idea, but we do have a belief that what we do in this world affects how we experience the world to come. And at the heart of that is the belief that what is good and what is blessed about every human being is not lost, even when the person dies. that death is, in fact, not a test so much as it is a homecoming, that we all eventually return to the source of being. But we can ease our way through that by choosing one way or another. All right, so this is expressed mythologically in Judaism with the idea of Gehenna, the idea that if we don't live a very good life, we may have to spend some time in timeout in the afterlife. Gehenna is the Jewish hell, but it's temporal. And depending on the state of your performance in this world, determines how much time you have to spend there. But ultimately, we all get back. All right, but pay attention to the fact that there are invisible worlds around us, that it's just not what you see before you that matters. All right, there are two worlds, this world and the hereafter. The numerical value of bet is 2, as I explained. The person who devotes himself to performing good deeds in this world will enjoy their fruits in the world and in this world and in the hereafter. So being a righteous person, I already suggested one interpretation is that it makes us co-creators with God. It's empowering in that sense, but it also, Judaism teaches that when we behave as decent people, as good people, it makes a difference. It makes a difference to how we experience this world, and it will make a difference in ways that we can't see, we can't know yet. The world to come, the Olam Haba. So however you interpret that, however you understand it, understand that there are not only visible lines of connection between how we behave and how we are treated, but there are invisible lines of connection. And that the good we do may not have visible results to us, but they do have an impact. And that impact not only affects other people, but affects us as well. So if we want to move through the world that we see and the world that we don't yet see, and make a positive impact on all of them, we need to be conscious of that and act accordingly, not with contempt, not with indifference, not with exploitation, but with acts of righteousness, of compassion and justice and fairness and love. That's what the bet is here to teach us, and that's what the Midrash wants us to know. So this is the end of session 4 of Minutes of Midrash, and as always, I and the lady, Statue of Liberty, wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing you when my vacation is over.